Welcome to the Bolo Chronicles, a show celebrating the written works of MacEwan students and alumni featured in the Bolo Tie Collective anthology series. I'm your host, Emma Morrison. Today's guest, Kyra Droog, is a MacEwan alumni. She has a master's in publishing and frequently contributes to the Bolo Tie anthologies. Join Kyra and I as we chat about creating moments and stories.
I like to sit in moments.
Right.
I want to take this specific moment, this specific feeling, this specific emotion, and I want to bring it to life. Mm-hmm. And I really enjoy playing with stories where you start reading and you feel like you know where things are going, and you're along for the journey and you're feeling it, and there's something at the end that makes you go, oh.
So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's get right in today's episode. Tell me a bit about yourself and how you started writing and how it has evolved, like your whole writing journey. Let me know. Let me hear all about that.
Oh my gosh. I've been writing stories since I could first string a sentence together. Like I was that kid that my mother put into school a year early because I could read, write, do basic math, and was driving her insane at home.
Yep.
So she was like, you need to go out into the world and learn things.
Yes. And
I found that, I guess kind of like from that first, like, you can string a sentence together. You know, here I was telling stories.
Right.
And it's always been this like really special piece for me of being able to see the world around me, try and help other people see the world the same way I do in some cases. Like the first thing I ever like officially wrote and had published, I was in like the 3rd grade. And it's this adorable little poem about what it feels like to go snowmobiling in Yellowknife, which is where I was living at the time. And my grandfather actually sent it to me not that long ago. He's like, do you remember this? And it's the cutest little thing. But it gets me thinking back to that fact that I've always wanted to be like someone that shares stories.
Right.
And I feel like that's kind of continued through my journey. Because I mean, I always, like, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist because, you know, as you
Dinosaurs,
do.
Dinosaurs,
Of course.
Who wouldn't want to?
Right. But then, you know, once I established that math wasn't my favorite thing and I needed a lot of that in order to be a paleontologist, I was like, I want to be a writer. And I feel like it's one of those things that you decide on when you're young and then you grow up and you're like, that's not actually going to happen. But like I stuck with it. I continued to write. I would write a little bit of everything. And some of it was awful and garbage and will never see the light of day. But some of it was a lot of fun. And it was that stuff that you'd come back to and you'd be like, I wrote that? That's actually not bad.
Yeah. I have those moments with creativity where I'm like, why did I film it this way? And then you go back, you're like, wait a minute. I was onto something here.
Right? Exactly. And my first like official creative writing class was actually here at MacEwan. And I remember it got me thinking about writing in a whole different way. The prof that I had at the time, we didn't exactly see eye to eye on creative writing.
Right.
I'm very like, I like to sit in moments.
Right.
I want to take this specific moment, this specific feeling, this specific emotion, and I want to bring it to life. And I really enjoy playing with stories where you start reading and you feel like you know where things are going, and you're along for the journey and you're feeling it, and there's something at the end that makes you go, oh.
Yeah.
And then you go back and you reread the story and you read it with a completely different lens. So it's almost like you get, you know, 2 stories for the price of one. And that was not something that my prof particularly enjoyed. And I remember them saying that, you know, this first piece of work that I'd turned in for them was never going to go anywhere.
Oh, boy.
And that was the first piece of work I got published in the Bolo Tie.
I love that. You're like, guess what happened?
Yeah,
guess
I was like, I'm also that person when someone is like, you can't do this. I'm like, watch me.
Yes, I'm very much like that.
I don't like people telling me what I can and can't do. I'm like, just because this isn't the right piece for you doesn't mean it's not the right piece for someone else.
Yeah, do you find that like with like being in the communication field, because we talked a little bit about it before, that a lot of work in writing in the creative arts, as we'll call them, is very much like your taste kind of thing?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't even know where I was going to go with that. There's just like so much I have to say on this topic.
Yeah, no, of course. Go for it.
Well, lots of the reading that I did when I was younger, it was very like, I'm a teen fiction girl.
Yeah.
I did my master's thesis on the Hardy Boys. I have my Hardy Boys mug here. It is like, that is not everybody's vibe.
Right.
I had a prof that told me that teen fiction wasn't a thing, that it didn't exist.
Oh, wow.
And that was a really long term.
Wow.
But it was, I don't know, there's people that want to write, you know, this really deep and dark and heartfelt and, you know, those things that stick with you that, you know, feel very reminiscent of those classics that you want to, you know, peel back the layers of and understand on a really deep level. And there are people that just want to write, you know, short stories that bring you into the moment.
Yeah.
And, you know, here's this little glimmer of, you know, hope or excitement or fear or whatever it is. And I think there's a place for every piece of creativity in existence. Like there's someone that it's going to speak to. It's like that stupid phrase that people always say that when you're in a lecture hall and you're like, I don't want to put my hand up because, you know, what if I'm the one that asks the stupid question? And the profs are like, if you're thinking about that question, there's a really good chance that there's somebody else that's also thinking about that.
Right.
And I feel like it's the same way for creativity. Like you have this idea, you have this thing that you want to share, you're almost guaranteed in this, you know, massive, now very interconnected world.
Yeah.
That there's somebody else out there that can empathize with it, that can connect with it.
Yeah, I totally get that. I've been that student that's like, maybe I shouldn't ask this question. Maybe I shouldn't. Like, it even goes to like posting content or publishing content as well, where you're like, I don't know. But then there's so many like-minded people, like the Bolo Tie Collective, where they're like, yeah, just do it, just go for it, you know?
Right? Absolutely. Yeah. And this was, I remember, one of my biggest regrets about my undergraduate degree was not playing a bigger part in the Bolo Tie Collective from an earlier time. Because I did copy editing, I did proofreading 1 year, I've been an author for a number of years, but I was never like an active part of the club. I mean, when I was here, there was a really strong executive that had been around for, you know, a number of years. They had an idea of where they were going. Like it was very, you could see the direction. And I remember being like, I don't know if I'm ready for that. I was totally, like, I should have done it.
Yeah.
I didn't do it. I regret that. But submitting my work for the first time, I remember that feeling of vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because it's the first time you do it, it's really scary to put that like creative piece of yourself out into the world for someone else to judge.
Yeah.
And I don't use Snapchat very often, but I have this Snapchat story from when I got my piece accepted. And I have the biggest grin on my face.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is going to be this most amazing thing. Like I remember that feeling of success of being like, for so many years, I've wanted to be like, I am a published writer. And that was the moment where they're like, we believe in you. And I feel like that's the strongest statement that you can ask for.
Yes.
As a writer, is for someone to come along and be like, we believe in your writing and we want to help you bring it to life.
Oh, that's such lovely words. That's so give me like chills because I know that feeling, you know? What was it like holding that piece, like that published book in your hands? Because I've talked to some other contributors and they're like, it's surreal. Like, what was your experience like for that?
It didn't even feel real.
Yeah.
And that first publication for me, I had lots of friends had submitted, lots of colleagues had submitted. So there was a group of us and we were all going around and signing each other's books and writing. And people were like, will you sign this? And I was like, I don't know what to do now. Like, I've always seen, you know, celebrities and authors just like signing their name like nobody's business. And I was like, should I have practiced for this moment? But it was, you know, you hold it and you like pull it off your bookshelf and you're like, this is my work. Like I helped bring this to life. And it just, even now, like when I got my master's thesis printed, I remember opening it and, you know, just kind of like ruffling the pages and being like, this is me on a page. And it, you know, it represents the culmination of, you know, hours of thought and writing and rewriting and in some cases literal blood, sweat, and tears in all cases.
Yes.
And just, you know, seeing that in this tangible, you can hand it to people and be like, this is a cool thing that I did.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it's just amazing. I can't even, it's a really big deal when the communicator doesn't have the words to describe
yes,
it.
I totally get that. You're like in awe of what just happened,
Exactly.
and you're just lost for words, which for communicators like us and people in communications degree, I call it like the social butterfly degree, for us not to have words or for us not to be able to communicate. Obviously, it's a really big deal.
Exactly.
Yeah, so moving on, what is your favorite sentence, paragraph, or part of your anthology piece? Now, I know you have contributed quite a bit to the Bolo Tie, so why don't you pick one of your favorite pieces that you have contributed and let me know what your favorite part is and why it's your favorite.
Oh my gosh. And I've been thinking about, I'm literally like, as we talk, going through and being like, which one do I want to go with? I don't know. When I write, I find it's I really, like I said earlier, try and stick to, like a specific moment.
Right.
In my short fiction specifically, and just kind of bringing all of those things that make up this individual, like it could be a second, but there's so much that goes on, in your mind. And I'll pull from my most recent story. It's called The Scar. It's actually the second sentence in the story. And it goes like this. The intoxicating mix of power and fear overtakes you, tightening your chest and sending a flutter of bees into your stomach. The perfect cocktail of innocence and beauty, danger and pain.
Wow. Oh my gosh. My body's just like, whoa.
Those are, and I remember thinking about, that butterflies in the stomach feeling.
Yes.
And going, how can I make it scarier?
Yeah.
And I was like, bees. Because, like, bees can be lovely.
They can.
But they can also, like...
be terrifying. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. I remember getting chased by them when I was young. God. And I would screech. And now I'm just like, oh, wow, they're just lovely pollinators.
And exactly. Because I remember sitting and being like, okay, butterflies, bees, or wasps? And I was like, wasps are a little too aggressive.
Yes. Very volatile and violent.
But I was like, bees gives you that sense of, you don't really know. Because in some cases you're like, oh yes, come land on my finger. I am a Disney princess.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not gonna sting me. We're gonna have a grand old time.
Yeah.
But you're never really sure when that sting is gonna come.
Yeah. That is such ooh. You know what I mean? So speaking on, because you talk a lot about moments.
Yeah.
So do you find this reoccurring, like that you have that reoccurring theme of like just focusing on moments? Like, do you have any other themes that you like to stick to? I know a lot of people love nature versus nurture, all those different types of themes. Right. Do you have a specific one that you see in your pieces or that you really, really, really love to just dive into or use a lot of the time?
I really love to come back to things that are really dark.
Yes.
I don't know what it is, but I find that because lots of my inspiration comes from music. I swear people thought I was crazy at one point because I would listen to music and I'd be like, there's a story here.
I do that too. Oh my
thank
gosh.
God. Okay. Because I'm the person that I'll listen to a song for the first time and I'll close my eyes and I can see the story just like starting to take place.
Right.
And the more I listen to the music, the more it kind of comes together. So when I'm thinking about those moments, sometimes I pull from, real life experience. Like when I pulled from The Scar, it was very much the original piece, which is actually not super similar to what I ended up finishing with. And that's the beauty of the editing process. It was just this really raw, visceral moment of anger and betrayal and remembering the way that I had felt in that specific moment and trying to find a way to take those emotions outside of myself.
Yeah.
And kind of pull them away, take them at an arm's length and be like, okay, why did I feel like this? People talk about, oh, I was angry. I was frustrated. I'm like, what does that feel like for you? Because I think it feels different. Everyone would describe it differently given the opportunity.
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, coming back to, so like there's those moments and like, a moment in time. But there's also that concept of like I mentioned earlier, you know, starting the story with one understanding
Right.
and then finishing with another.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first stories where I really got to play with that in a slightly longer form was, oh my gosh, I don't remember which volume of the Bolo Tie, but I did a story. It's called The Jones Files.
Mm-hmm.
And you read it through the first time
Mm-hmm.
with a very, you know, you think you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And you get to the end and something happens and your perspective shifts and you're like, oh my God. And then when you read through the story a second time, you're looking for those clues and those hints that kind of lead you to it. And I don't know, I've always found a lot of value in stories that you can read multiple times and you're kind of like plucking different pieces out every time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's the stories that you read, like, you know, in your high school English class where it's kind of obvious what you're expected to pull out.
Absolutely.
But I want to take that a step further and be like, okay, you know, you read it through the first time innocently, I guess.
Yeah.
And when you go back through in the next few times, you're like, oh, I understand why that seemingly weird phrase is done that way. Or I understand why, you know, this person is referred to in this specific way, which might seem a little bit odd.
Mm-hmm.
And it just, editing it was like a whole bear in itself.
Yeah.
And my editors and I had so much fun, you know, questioning basically how many hints we could put in there without giving it away.
Oh, wow. I love that.
And then, you know, bringing it to people and being like, okay, read this and tell me what you think. And I remember giving it to a friend. We'd LRT together. And I gave it to her on the LRT. And I just like very creepily almost like sat and watched. And I'm like watching her like face change. And she got to the end and she like slammed it shut. And she was like, how dare you? And I was like, yes, this is it. I've done it.
So speaking of that, or just like writing in general and reading, do you find that you have any authors, even pop culture or music, that significantly has influenced your writing style, especially with these moments and everything like that?
Cornelia Funk.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know Cornelia Funk.
I don't, but
Okay.
I would love to know.
Oh, I will tell you more. So Cornelia Funk is a German author.
Okay.
And she did the Inkheart series.
Mm-hmm.
And Inkheart is the book that made me want to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, I've wanted to be a writer for a long time. You know, I'm waving my hands around. I'm like, whatever, you know, that, dreams and all. But I remember reading Inkheart and wanting to be able to bring characters to life the way that Cornelia Funk did. And the really fascinating piece about Inkheart, before I tell you a little bit more about it, it was originally written in German. It was translated into English. And the translation is just so... I would love to learn how to read in German so that I can read the original and do like a side-by-side comparison.
Yeah.
Because I remember finding out that it was translated and I was like, there's no way that this translated work is still so beautiful. It's so powerful. But Inkheart follows the premise of this family that they're called silver tongues. I'm spoiling this by spoiler alert. Yeah.
Yes.
But they can, when they read aloud, they can pull pieces of the fictional world into reality. And, you know, they learn throughout the book that they have the ability to kind of pull things both ways. So they can bring people in, like into the written work, but they can also bring people out. And these characters come out of this written world, you know, flesh and blood, and they're exactly as they were described in the book. And I was like, one day I want to be able to write in a way that if someone was to read it out loud like that these characters would literally leap off the page.
I love that. I'm a musician, and so listening to like works from like Camille Saint-Saëns or anything like that, you know, it really makes me feel like I want to do that. And that's so lovely that you have an author like that, because I'm not very good at writing yet, but I'm more just like, I'm going to read and digest as much as possible to find that person that really like brings me into the world of writing and everything. Speaking of me not being a very good writer, just kidding.
You gotta give yourself some more credit, girl.
What advice would you give to aspiring writers looking to find their voice or just who they are, and trying to get into the creative art of writing?
This is going to sound so stereotypical and I feel so bad, but write.
Yeah.
Take those jumbled thoughts that are in your head and put them on paper and see what happens.
Yes.
And, don't be shy to put your work out there and show it to people and ask for feedback. And I mean, when I finished my first, I say this fancily, my first full-length manuscript, I was 14.
Yeah.
I had no clue what I was doing. And my English teacher had recommended that I reach out to this student for some editing. And I paid this lady for her editing experience. She really liked vampire romance, and I did not write a vampire romance. That was not editing. That was not helpful feedback. She basically was like, you were an awful writer. I don't care about your characters. I don't care about anything. I'm literally only continuing to read this because you're paying me for it.
Oh, gosh.
And you know what? As a 14-year-old, that destroyed me. I was like, I'm never going to write again. But also, it gave me that, that little shit sense of I'm like, I'm going to bring this to life now just to spite you.
Yeah.
Because and you're going to come across people that like that are like hoity-toity, a little bit nose in the air, like, my writing is better than yours and I'm just going to try and take you down a notch because you're too excited about it. But you're also going to run into people that genuinely want to help and support you and give you the resources and ideas and thoughts that you need to grow. And I feel like that's you have to put yourself out there to find those people. You're going to encounter the ones that aren't necessarily going to help.
Yeah.
And it's going to take time to grow that thicker skin about the work that you're putting out there because everyone's writing is inherently personal.
Right.
And you feel that really strong connection to it. And that's incredibly valid and valuable. And you always want to keep a sense of that. But it's really important to be able to kind of filter through the feedback that people give you and kind of sort it into the things that you can use and that you can take away and that will help you and the things that maybe don't need to be in your life right now.
Yes, I totally agree with that. What was the most impactful moment for you at the Bolo Tie Collective?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that very first acceptance was really kind of the part that got me going because it made me feel like I could do it, that there was somebody else out there that believed in my writing enough to say, I want to share this.
Right.
I want to put this with another group, or I want to put this with a group of other writers, and I want to share it with the world. And that, just thinking back to that moment, there's nothing more powerful than somebody saying, I believe in your writing and I want to help bring it to life. But I think also there's so much value in the conversations that you get to have with your editors. And one of the things that I really have come to appreciate about the Bolo Tie is that, editing isn't a one-way street. And this is how editing should be. Unless you're, proofreading and this period is actively in the wrong place.
Yes.
Editing should be a conversation. And the fact that your editors are students and, for the most part, you're a student and you're having those conversations and growing your work together.
Right.
There's so many pieces that I've worked on that have gone in directions that, I never would have thought of by myself. But it came from an editor going, hey, what about this? Hey, have you thought about trying this? There are things that, as a writer, you see in a very specific way. And you're like, this is how I intend my work to go. But sometimes your editor will come in with some ideas from left field. And you're like, oh, I hadn't even thought about that. That would be really cool. I remember working with my editors for the Jones Files. And they were like, what if you tried this approach? Or what if here you use this specific descriptor that will mean so much more the second time around? And I remember, because we'd met in Allard Hall and we'd had our little conversation and they'd, gone their separate ways. And I remember just sitting there and listening to everybody walk past, but also kind of being in my own world of going, I never would have thought of this myself. And it's going to make this process and this piece so much stronger.
I love that. Well, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come and talk to me on the Bolo Tie podcast. We really, really appreciate it. And I really, really appreciate your insight. It was so lovely. It gave me chills.
Oh my gosh.
And thank you. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. So.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. This is so much fun. And I feel like we've covered a lot, but if I'm leaving, anything with the folks that are listening, I just really want it to be, to take that chance, to put yourself out there, because I think the thing that the Bolo Tie kind of taught me is the worst someone can say is no. But what happens if they don't?
Thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Bolo Chronicles. We hope you enjoyed our conversations with Kyra about creating moments. If you enjoyed what you heard, subscribe on YouTube and click the notification bell. You can follow us on our socials at the Bolo Tie Collective. The theme music is by MLAP 101 with editing done by Emma Morrison.